Now we are officially underway. So let me just begin by introducing myself. My name is Sandra Pena, and I will be your trainer for this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you're watching me from. It's nighttime here in South Florida. I just want to tell you before we get started that I am a former elementary school teacher myself. I taught down here in South Florida for 15 years, mostly 5th grade, dabbled in 3rd and 7th, but primarily 5th grade was my wheelhouse. And I think that's important for you to know up front because that's the perspective I bring when I talk to you about the site. I look at the site through the lens of a classroom teacher, if you will. So I do think that's important for you to know up front. Okay, so our webinar today is designed to meet the needs of our more experienced users. However, if you are a newbie and you found your way in here, that's totally fine. Please stay. But I would encourage you to check out our VSC 101 webinar where you can get filled in on some of the basics. We actually have a recorded version of that available on the site. Right here where it says free online training, you can access all of our training options. So we have a recorded version of the VSC 101, or you could register for our next live session of VSC 101 on March 27th at 3:30 Eastern Daylight Time or 6 o'clock. So maybe you'll join one of those sessions with us. Okay, so just to give you an overview of what you're going to be getting today, we are going to be taking a look at some of the newer features of Vocabulary Spelling City, specifically the review list and the personal student list. After that, we are going to take a look at some of the newer learning activities that your students now have access to play on our site. And we're going to talk about the best academic use of those as part of your weekly routine. You know, where would they best fit into your word study routine? After that, we're going to round it out with talking about a new way to use some old favorites. We're going to highlight our writing activities and talk to you about how you can make use of those to expand writing opportunities into the content areas for your students. So I'm going to go ahead and pop off my webcam at this time so you can focus on my screen, but you'll still be able to hear my voice. And let's go ahead and log in and get started. Okay, so as you recall, when you first log in, the first page that you are brought to is your list management page, and this is actually where we're going to be starting from. The first feature we're going to talk about today is our review list feature, and that is located right here in this pink bar on your list management page. Okay, so the review list feature allows teachers to generate data-driven review lists to help your students engage in cumulative word study. So let's take a look at how this feature works. So let's say, for example, I was studying with my students. I have a folder down here. I'm going to go ahead and open up Max and Bella Blue. And let's say they've been practicing their sight words. You know, maybe one week they practice list 1, then the next week list 2, list 3, and list 4, and so forth. So now here we are at the end of that 4-week period, and I would like them to review their sight words and get a little bit, more out of it, just to make sure they didn't forget the ones that they learned earlier. So I'm going to create a review list based on these 4 lists right here. So the first thing is to select the list you would like to include. I checked off 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're going to come up here to choose an action, and you're going to select Create a Review List. Now, when you create a review list, you actually have 2 options. You can create one single class list where the list is the same for every student in your class, or you can create individual lists where the lists are different for every student in your class. I'm going to actually show you uses for both methods, but the first one we're going to do is we're going to create individual lists. So I'm going to click on my second option right here because I want to create a different list for every student in my class. So after you decide which type of list you'd like to create, the next decision that you have to make is, well, how many words do I want to include in that review list? You see this little sidebar here? There's a total of 40 words on both of those, all 4 of those lists. So that's a little much for a sight word review list. So I'm going to slide it down here, and we'll choose 16 words. Now, also at this time, what I'd like to do, if you'll notice, the list title was defaulted to the date. Well, that doesn't really mean much to me, so I'm going to at this time come in here and rename it because I want to name it what it is. It is a sight word review list. And if you want to add a date range into there, that's perfectly appropriate for you. This is what I would like to name mine, sight word review list. And once I've decided on the name and the number of words, I'm just going to go ahead and create an individual review list. It says my lists were created successfully. As simple as that. I hit close. I'm going to close up my folder to keep everything nice and neat. And let's take a look at what we just did. So if I come up here where my review lists are housed, and I open this up, you will see right here it says individual sight word review list. Now this list right here is what we call the mother list, if you will. It has all of the words on it that we wanted to include. Okay, but that's too much for all of your students. So then if you'll notice, when you open it up, here's where you will see each individual list that was created for the different students in my class. So for example, let's take a look at Bella Blue's list, sight word review list. And here are the 16 words that were selected for her to review on her review list, where, look, help, is, three, and so forth. Now let's just take a look at another student's. Let's take a look at Max's. And you can see the words are very different. To, run, a, read, me, funny. The words are different because, as I said when I introduced this feature, it is data-driven. So what the computer does is it takes the words that each individual student missed on the test that they took for those lists, and it combines them into a review list unique to that child. So it is a very powerful tool to have at your disposal to be able to generate these data-driven review lists, to really make reviewing meaningful for each individual student in your class. Now, I want to mention, though, in the absence of data, the list will be generated randomly. So let's say, for example, I went and I created these lists for each of these 5 students. Well, maybe George was absent one week and he didn't have test data on sight word list number 3. Well, then the computer would give me a message and say, you know, there's a student that doesn't have all the data. It will be generated randomly. And you just say, okay. That happens sometimes if you have an absent student, and then the computer will generate it randomly. But when there's data there, it is data-driven, and that's a really nice feature. Okay, now another possible use for the review list feature is maybe you don't want to select, you know, just some words from a list, but maybe if you're working with older kids and you're in the content area, let's say I'm studying some science vocabulary with my older students. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to open my Syllables Matter modules down here where I have some science vocabulary. And let's say I just finished going over 1 week's worth of states of matter and 1 week's worth of changes in matter with my 5th grade students, so to speak. Okay, well, now I want to combine those lists together, but I want all the words from both lists. So, and I don't necessarily want different lists for every kid in my class. I want one list for the whole class. I just essentially want to combine these lists together. So what I do is I select the list that I want. I come up here to choose an action, just like before, and I select Create a Review List. And this time I'm going to go ahead and select Create a Single Class List. And again, I have the option to decide how many words. Now remember, I just wanted to combine the list, so I'm going to slide it all the way over, and I want all 22 words. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. I don't want to call it Review List by Date. I'm going to call it, we'll call it Matter Vocabulary Review List. So I change the name, I decide on the number of words, I click Create Review List. It says it was created successfully. I close out. I tidy up by closing up my folders. And let's take a look over here and see what we did. Under my review list, and there it is. There's the class review list that actually just combined all of the vocabulary together to create one big review list on those 2 weeks of study. So there's 2 little suggestions on how you can make use of our review list feature into your classroom to help enhance word study in your classroom. So the next feature we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to is our personal student list. And that is actually also controlled from list management right here in the green bar. Now, the very first thing I need to tell you about personal student list is that if you would like to use this feature, you need to turn it on. Your accounts, all accounts, are defaulted in the off position. So yours likely says off here unless you've already been in there playing around with it. So if you would like to use this feature, you would come in here and turn it on and click Done. And now it's on, and now your students have access to create their own personal list. Okay? Well, let's take a look at how you would use that in the classroom. Now, this is where you would manage those lists from as the teacher, and you can open up each student folder and you can take a look at their list. Let's open up Max's folders. Now, the personal student lists are broken down into two categories. You'll see here I have student-specific list and student-created list. Now, student-specific lists are lists that I, as the teacher, have assigned specifically to that student, Max. For example, the individual review list that we just made would be a student-specific list for Max. And here it is, sight word review list. That's what that means by student-specific. Or there's also student-created list, and these are lists that your student has actually physically typed in the words themselves and created these lists from the student view. Okay, we're going to come back to the teacher view, but for what I want to do now is I want to go over to the student view, and I'm going to show you exactly how your students would go about creating those lists. So let's log out as me, and now I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my student view and log in as my student Max. I actually recommend doing this, bouncing back and forth between the teacher and the student view. It's a really great way to become more comfortable with the capabilities of the site by just, doing a little cause and effect with yourself. Do something as the teacher, do something as a student, and, go back and forth and see how everything works. It's a really great way to learn all the ins and outs of the site. Okay, so here I am. I am signed in as my student, Max, right now. This is what the student view will look like. Right over here on the right where you see this yellow grid, it says create a new list. This is where your students would go ahead and type in the words that they would like to create a list for. Okay, well, let's talk about why you would want to use personal student lists in the classroom in the first place. Well, the first suggestion I'll give you is as part of your spelling or language routine. So let's say you have a student who wants to review spelling words. They're having a hard time with some of their words, and they want to make a list of spelling words. Spelling words I want to know better. And, this is something that the child could do independently, or the parents could even get involved at this level and help and guide the students in creating their own list. So let's just go ahead and create a sample one. As if I was a student, I'm just going to go ahead and choose some of my sight words that I was having a little trouble with, and I'm going to type in my list. Make yellow little funny 3 jump help here. Okay, that's good. 8 words just to get the point across. So when the student has decided on how many words they would like to include, they would click Save. And that list will automatically pop right over here under their, see how the folder just opened automatically? Here it is under their personal student list. So now what they can do is they can go ahead and take a practice spelling test with these words. They can actually take a real spelling test if they want to, but I would encourage them to take the practice one because they can only take one actual test. And then you'd have to go into test results and clear their data. So tell them to just always choose the practice test if they're doing this. Or they could go in and do a spelling teach me game with it and learn the words a little bit more.
A-K-E.
Okay, so that was spelling teach me. Or they could actually just access any of the games. Maybe they want to play a little audio word match or missing letter, hang mouse. It's up to the student at that point. So they could go ahead and play any of the activities to practice their spelling words. Okay, so that is one use as part of your language routine. Now, let's consider creating a personal student list in the content areas. So what do you think about this scenario? You have your students, you've given them a science passage to read independently, and they inevitably are going to come across some vocabulary that they're not familiar with. Well, we all have strategies on how to deal with that. What do they do at that point? They write the word down to look it up later. They ask a neighbor. They ask you. Sometimes they just skip right over it. Maybe encourage them to use context clues. Well, here's just one more strategy that you can employ in your classroom to help students when they're reading content area passages. They come across unfamiliar vocabulary. So what I did is I went ahead and I just created a sample list of what that might look like. So let's say Max was reading a science passage and he came across some words that he wanted to know better. So here I created a science words I want to know better list. And just 5 words. You could keep it simple. You could tell the kids to choose 5, 10, depending on the grade level, what's ever appropriate for the level of the child. But here's the list that Max created. And what you'll notice what they can do with this list is they can take a spelling test, but also a vocabulary test. They can do the Spelling Teach Me, or they can play any of the other games. But also, one nice little extra feature that they can do is they can actually edit their list by coming here, and they can choose alternate definitions with your guidance of, or independently, depending on the level of your students. So they can really practice not just how to spell the words, but the definition of them as well. Okay, so there's something that I suggested maybe in science as they're reading a science passage, or maybe as they're completing some math homework. Maybe there's some math vocabulary and they're struggling with some word problems, and they would like to become more comfortable with some math terms. Well, here's just a short list of 5 math words where they can once again go in and play some games, take a vocabulary test, just become more familiar with these terms in general. So there's some just, a couple of quick suggestions for you on how to incorporate the personal student list feature into your classroom to help maximize, instruction and your students' vocabulary. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you about personal student lists, I'm going to log out as me now, log out as Max and log back in as me. Now, once your students create these lists, of course you as the teacher, you want to have the power to review these lists and make sure that they are appropriate. So when you come in here, and let's open up Max's folder and his student created list, what you can do, here's that spelling words I want to know better list that we just created. I can actually import this list into my teacher account, and when you click on that, you have 3 options. You either want to import that list so only you and that student has it, or let's say, hey, Max made a really great list and I think the rest of his reading group might benefit from that list. Then I can share that with a selection of students, or maybe Max created a list that I think is appropriate for the entire class to be shared on, and I can share them on it there. But once you import the list into the teacher account, you do have the ability to view it, make sure it's appropriate and accurate, and even make edits to it if you would like. Okay? So that's pretty much our 2 new features in a nutshell. I hope you can see how you can make great use of those in your classroom. For the next portion of our webinar today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of our newer learning activities. Okay, so in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my folder down here and select a word list to load up so I can play a couple of those games with you and show you what they look like. So I'll just come down here to my site word list, I'll click on play game, and that's going to bring me to my game page menu. Now, before I go in and dive into the new ones, you'll see they all have the little new symbols here. I just want to give you a little piece of advice in general about the learning activities and games. There are over 30 of them that we have available now, and they're so different in what they bring to the table. My biggest piece of advice to you about these games is I do think it's so important for the teachers to get in there and play these games themselves. That is really how you can make the best decision on how they can best be used into your academic routine, what day of the week kind of fits into their slot. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look at some of these new activities now, and then we'll talk about where they fit into your academic routine. The new activities I'm referring to are right here. I've got Word-A-Pillar, Aim to Spell, Splat and Spell, and then down here we have Alphabetize with JoJo, and we have word videos. I'm going to go ahead and just start out with Aim to Spell. I think this one's super cute and super fun. The kids have a lot of fun with this one. And this one is definitely for let me just turn the music down.
Big, but the mouse is small.
So this is definitely an activity that you would use to enhance spelling skills for sure. You know, here we go. They're just spelling the words. I would say it would be appropriate to use for practice on maybe day 2 or even on day 1 after they've had maybe played a little spelling teach me first, just to get to know their words a little bit better. They can hear the word read to them again. They can hear the sentence read again, and they actually see the sentence here. So that's quickly aim to spell. Let's go back to play a game. The next one I want to pop open for you is word videos. We'll go right down here to word videos. I see word videos as a really good day 1 activity to assign to the younger learners because it definitely has a cute factor.
Video. Select your options and press play to start your word video.
So this one allows the kids to get involved a little and pick some different choices here. They can choose to hear a sentence or not. They can choose to have it go slow or fast. They can get rid of the music if they'd like. I'll just keep it with speed it up and cheesy, just so I can show you what it looks like.
Watch and learn your words. Blue. Come.
So very basic again, just a really great way for the students to be introduced to the words and the repetition of seeing them, hearing them read to them. Word videos, again, it's a really nice day 1, maybe day 2 activity at the beginning of the week. Another activity that I'm going to go ahead and open up for you is Word-O-Pillar. And again, I think this one's a little more appropriate for the younger learners because it has that cute factor. But if you put sophisticated words in here, they're just unscrambling. So, you know, you could use this in the upper grades as well.
My favorite color in the rainbow.
So here they get to actually just unscramble the letters and put the word together. So again, I see this one definitely as more of a day 2 kind of practice, analyze, reinforce, you know, to hit those skills for the students to get to know their words. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to let you play Splat and Spell by yourself and Alphabetize with JoJo by yourself. But again, just to let you know, I do see both of those as being appropriate for use on day 2, maybe day 1, where you want your students to just kind of meet their new words and get that initial exposure to, pick them apart a little bit, and just practice and reinforce. So, but there's those 5 games that are there for you and your students to play at this time. So for the next portion of our webinar, and actually the last section, we're going to focus on a couple of the writing activities. Now, these are not necessarily new. They've been around for a while, sentence writing practice and paragraph writing practice. But I'm going to talk to you about maybe a new way to think about using them in the classroom. So, you know, hopefully you'll come away today with a fresh perspective and some new ideas on how to incorporate them into your classroom to really expand writing opportunities across the content area. So if you're not familiar with these 2 writing activities, let me just briefly describe what they do. Essentially what you do is you assign your students a list of words, and then you would ask them to either write sentences with those words, and this is what that would look like. They would get the list of words and then this space to write their sentences. Or you would ask your students to write a paragraph with those words. And if you do that, this is what it looks like for that activity. You have the words in a word bank up here, and then you have a large space here for them to write. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to log out as me again. I'm going to go back over to the student because I've created a couple of assignments for my student Max, and we're just going to go ahead and complete those assignments as if we were the student Max. We're going to do a sentence writing practice activity and a paragraph writing practice activity. And just so you know, creating assignments is a topic that I do cover in VSC 101. If you're not familiar with that process, that is covered in that more basic webinar. So if you need a little brush up on that, you can check out the recorded version on the site. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our first one here. My geography assignment was sentence writing practice. So here's where you could think about using VocabularySpellingCity not just as part of your spelling routine and not just as part of your reading routine, but let's bring it into the other content areas as well. Let's have our students writing some sentences with their geography vocabulary. You know, why not? Let's go there too. So as if I was a student, I'm going to go ahead and type in a sentence just so you can get familiar with the gameplay. So let's say the young buffalo was separated, oops, all kinds of typos, separated with its family online. Okay, I'm typing as if I was the student. Okay, now I don't need to go ahead and fill in all the sentences. Just for our demonstration purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and do one sentence. I'm going to go ahead and click Done. And now the next page that the student is brought to, it gives them an opportunity to edit. Now I really like it, and if you're not familiar with this feature over here, check this out. They can hear the sentence read back to them exactly as they wrote it.
The young buffalo was separated with its family on wide open plain.
And, you know, that sounds all kinds of awkward. So they come in here and they can hear their mistakes. I think that's so much more powerful than having to read their own mistakes. It is very difficult to get students to edit their own work, and having them be able to hear it will absolutely enhance, you know, the likeliness that they'll catch their mistakes. So the young buffalo was separated from its family on the wide open plain. That's what I meant to say. So now I can come in here and click it again.
The young buffalo was separated from its family on the wide open plain.
So as you can see, this is just a really nice opportunity to incorporate some social studies vocabulary and provide your students an opportunity to demonstrate that they know what these terms mean and that they can use them in sentences themselves. Okay, let's go ahead and submit that, and that'll go over to the teacher, where the teacher can evaluate it. And after we complete our second assignment, we're going to take a look at where the teacher can do the evaluating. So now we're going to go ahead and complete our next assignment, fraction practice, and we're going to see how you can use paragraph writing practice to enhance math vocabulary. So let's click on paragraph writing practice, and what I did is I went ahead and assigned my students a list of math vocabulary, but I don't want them to write a paragraph. What I want them to do is I want them to list out the steps for me in how to convert. Did you hear that ding? It's because I used the word convert. How to convert an improper fraction, oops, wait for it, I'll get there, improper fraction to a mixed number. Ding. Now, in the interest of time, you don't want to sit here and watch me type. I'm just going to copy and paste in the rest of my steps that I've already come up with just to demonstrate. Okay, and I got dinged because I used all the words. But so take a look at this. I mean, this is a really nice way to think outside of the box and use paragraph writing practice for something other than paragraph writing practice, first of all, but then also in math. You know, and watch this. When I hit done, and I get to the editing page, now they can hear exactly what they wrote read back to them.
How to convert an improper fraction to a mixed number. 1. Divide the numerator by the denominator. 2. The quotient will be the whole number part of the mixed number. 3.
You get the point. I don't need you to listen to the entire thing there, but I mean, what a powerful tool to use with, you know, struggling math students who really need to focus on that step by step, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3. That's very powerful for students who have a hard time remembering, oh, what do I do next? I don't remember. So consider making use of your paragraph writing practice in that manner. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and submit this, and it will go directly over to my teacher. So now I've completed both of our writing assignments. We're going to go ahead and log out of Max's account, and we're going to log back into the teacher account. And now I'm going to show you where you can go ahead and give feedback to that, and also where you can customize directions to switch it up and use it for other things besides writing sentences and paragraphs. So when you want to access your students' writing, you come up here to your toolbox and you click on Writing. And remember that assignment was for Max, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Max. And I want to look at his, we'll look at the geography one first, the sentence writing practice. And here's that sentence that we wrote. So now as the teacher, I have the ability to come in here and give some feedback in the form of an emoticon. I can give them a score as part of a rubric here, which will translate directly to a percentage down here at the bottom. Or I can make use of the text window and give very specific feedback for each individual sentence. If you don't want to score individually, you can switch up here to global scoring and give comments up there. Okay? And let's go over back to the writing. And now let's look at his paragraph writing practice. So if I go over to the fraction practice and I click on paragraph writing practice, this is what the feedback will look like for the teacher. Here's all the words that were on the word list. Here's the student work, what they completed right here, all of the steps on how to convert improper fraction to mixed number and vice versa. And here you have the ability to give it a score using a rubric. You can give it emoticon, or you can use the text box and type in very specific feedback. Any one of the three methods are at your disposal. As soon as you hit save, that feedback goes directly back to your students where they can access that from the student login as well. Now, let's look at how you can customize those directions, though. You know, I keep saying, like, oh, think outside of the box, use these for other things. Okay, well, if you come over here to video and sentence instructions, what you have over here are some suggestions on, okay, well, maybe you don't want your students to write sentences. Maybe you want them to write their own definitions, or a synonym, or an antonym, or a riddle, or an analogy. If you click this one here, you can type in the text box, and you can tell them to write anything you want. You can have them write other words that have the same prefix or the same suffix, or have the same root, or belong to the same family, or are just associated with in some manner. It's really only limited to your imagination as to what your students can put in that space. Because both of these writing activities, they're just templates, and they offer your students an opportunity to just communicate writing to you in a very convenient way. And similarly, if you go over here to video and paragraph instructions, here's where you have the option and some suggestions on perhaps how else to make use of these, where you can customize your directions